So then, the idea of a home video gaming console came back in the 70s, when in 72 to be exact, a man named Ralph H. Baer created the Magnavox Odyssey, along with a team at Sanders Associates. This was a console which came packaged with two rectangular controllers which were wired, and the console itself, which was essentially a rectangular white, black and brown box.
While people who want television to do their thing entertain themselves with Odyssey.
It was capable of displaying 3 dots and 1 line of varying height on the screen in monochrome black and white. Players would place plastic overlays on their TV sets to create additional elements for the games being played.
Odyssey can be attached to any brand television receiver with a screen size of 18 to 25 inches, and an ordinary screwdriver is the only tool needed to attach this Odyssey antenna game switch to the antenna terminals on the back of the television set. Once the antenna game switch is attached, you can select the TV position for regular television viewing, or the game position for playing your favorite Odyssey game.
1 or 2 players would control the dots with the controller, depending what the game was being played. There was no audio chip within it, so there was no sound.
Each Odyssey game uses one of these special game cards, which plug into a slot at the front of the master control unit. The game cards activate lights on your television screen that bounce, float, or extinguish on contact.
Ralph originally conceived this idea of the Magnavox way back in 1966, but only created prototypes until 1972. The Magnavox in total sold over 350,000 units.
You serious?
I think it's safe to say, man, we have definitely come a long way since then. And before we go any further, it's worth mentioning that 5 years into a console's lifespan is classed as a generation, and usually within that time, multiple versions of the console will be released, such as the Slims and Pros we have today.
Wow! Incredible!
From 1975 to 1977, the Magnavox transitioned to using integrated chips, which led them to develop a new line of Odyssey consoles. Back in 1972, Atari successfully launched Pong as an arcade game, and by late 74 they began trying to make a home console version, which led them to eventually partnering with Sears, and by Christmas in 75 they were successful.
Nice one, brother! Nice one, brother!
Pong had several advantages over the Odyssey technology-wise, including a sound chip and the ability to track score. Company Coleco developed the first Telstar console in '76.
Telstar by Coleco with 3 different games. Telstar Tennis with digital scoring, variable speeds. Telstar Hockey. Each player controls a goalie plus a forward on the other side. Oops, a goal.
Which led to Magnavox, Atari and Coleco fighting for the console space. The Japanese market for gaming consoles followed a similar path. Nintendo had already been a business partner of Magnavox back in '71 and helped to design some of the early light guns for the console. Dedicated home game consoles appeared in 1975 with Epocho's TV Tennis. The Color TV game console released by Nintendo was the first console ever made by them, and it was released as part of a series of 5 consoles between 1977 and 1983. Released only in Japan, selling over 3 million units.
Oh my!
So then, by the time the 80s came around, consoles began using 8-bit processors, which allowed 5 audio channels and more advanced graphical capabilities, such as the use of sprites and tiles instead of block-based graphics. Both the Sega SG-1000 and the Nintendo Famicom launched at the same time in Japan in 1983. By the end of 1984, the Famicom, after some initial technical recalls, soon became the best-selling console in Japan. By the time it was discontinued in 2003, it had sold over 61 million units. By this point, Nintendo wanted to bring the console to North America to try and revitalise the gaming market over there. So after a lot of redesign, it launched in North America as the NES, which stands for Nintendo Entertainment System, successfully revitalising the gaming market in North America. Sega attempted to compete with the NES with their own Master System, released later in 1986 in both the US and Japan, but it did not gain the traction to compete. Similarly, Atari's attempts to compete with the NES via the Atari 7800 in 1987 failed to knock the NES from its dominant position as well, truly making it a beast of its time. The fourth generation of consoles, also known as the 16-bit generation, further advanced core console technology with 16-bit processors, improving the available graphics and audio capabilities of games. In 1987, a company called NEC released their TurboGrafx 16, also known as the PC Engine, in Japan.
Introducing TurboGrafx 16, the next generation video game system. It's 4 times faster, so the games are more exciting. There are almost 10 times as many colors, so the arcade quality graphics are even more intense.
And it is classed as the first console of the fourth generation, even though it still used an 8-bit CPU. The console's 16-bit graphics processor gave it capabilities comparable to other later fourth generation consoles, like the Sega Genesis and the SNES. Another company called SNK also entered the competition with a modified version of their Neo Geo MVC arcade system into the Neo Geo, released in 1990, which attempted to bridge the gap between the arcade and the home console systems with the shared use of common game cartridges and memory cards. This generation was notable for the so-called console wars between Nintendo and Sega. Sega, to try to challenge Nintendo's dominant position, created the mascot character Sonic the Hedgehog, who exhibited cool personality to appeal to the Western youth in contrast to Nintendo's Mario, and bundled the Genesis with the game of the same name. The strategy succeeded, with Sega becoming the dominant player in North America until the mid-90s. During this generation, the technology costs of using optical discs in the form of CD-ROMs had dropped sufficiently to make them desirable to be used for shipping computer software, including for video games for personal computers. CD-ROMs offered more storage space than game cartridges and could allow for full motion video and other detailed audio-video works to be used in games. Console manufacturers adapted by creating hardware add-ons for their consoles that could read and play CD-ROMs, including NEC's TurboGrafx CD add-on. I did not know this, man, until I researched for this video. I found this quite interesting. Nintendo and Sony had initially worked together to develop a similar add-on for the SNES, the Super NES CD-ROM, but just before its introduction, business relationships between Nintendo and Sony broke down, and Sony would take its ideas on to develop the 5th generation PlayStation. To keep their console competitive with the new 5th generation ones, Nintendo took to the use of coprocessors. Coprocessors manufactured into the game cartridges to enhance the capabilities of the SNES. This included the Super FX chip, which was first used in the game Star Fox in 1993. Generally considered one of the first games to use real-time polygon-based 3D rendering on consoles, which is pretty awesome, man. Moving into the 90s, we now enter the most impactful generation of home consoles. The 90s truly saw a boom to video games with the release of Sony's PlayStation.
I'd like to talk to you about a menace, threatening humanity. It's happening right here, in our very homes, and corrupting the lives of our loved ones. Yes, friends, I'm talking about this. It may look like a harmless bagel toaster, but inside is a deadly donut.
With the console eventually selling over 100 million units, home computers were also thriving alongside consoles as a way of gaming during the 90s. But due to the advantages of much lower prices, easier portability, circuitry specifically dedicated towards video games, and the ability to be played on a television set, which most PCs at the time could not do, eventually they put all their future efforts into making home consoles. Two of the key consoles of the 5th generation were introduced in '95, the Sega Saturn and Sony's PlayStation, both which challenged the SNES's ongoing dominance. While the Saturn sold well, it did have a number of technical flaws, but established Sega for a number of key game series going forward. The PlayStation, in addition to using optical media, also introduced the use of memory cards as to save the state of a game. The PlayStation's approach allowed games to have a much longer gameplay and narrative elements, leading to highly successful role-playing games like Final Fantasy by 1996. By 1996, the PlayStation became the best-selling console. Nintendo released their next console, the Nintendo 64, in late 1996.
We will walk through walls. We will take a look around us.
We will not be confined.
Unlike other 5th generation units, it still used game cartridges, as Nintendo believed the load time advantages of cartridges over CD-ROMs were still essential. Although the Nintendo 64 did not match the PlayStation in terms of sale, it kept Nintendo a key competitor in the home console market alongside Sony and Sega. As with the transition from the 4th to 5th generation, the 5th generation has a long overlap with the 6th console generation, with the PlayStation remaining in production right up until 2006.
Perfect.
The technology of the 6th generation in consoles began to catch up to that of personal computers of the time. The consoles saw further adaptation of optical media, expanding into the DVD format for even greater storage capacity. By this point, there were only 3 major players in the market: Sega, Sony and Nintendo. Sega got an early lead with the Dreamcast, first released in Japan in 1998. It was the first home console to include a modem to allow players to connect to the Sega network and play online games. However, Sega found several technical issues that had to be resolved before its Western launch in 1999, but the console was soon outperformed by Sony's PlayStation 2, released in 2000. The PlayStation 2 was the first console to add support for DVD playback in addition to CD-ROM, as well as maintaining backward compatibility with games from the PlayStation library, which helped to draw customers that remained on the long tail of the PlayStation. While other consoles of the 6th generation had not anticipated this step, the PlayStation 2's introduction of backwards compatibility became a major design consideration of future generations. Along with a strong game library, the PlayStation 2 went on to sell 155 million units before it was discontinued in 2013.
Nice, bruv!
Fucking nice one, brother!
Nice one, bruv! Brother!
Fuck off!
Nintendo's entry in the 6th generation was the GameCube in 2001. Its first systems used optical media discs based on the mini DVD format. A special Game Boy player attachment allowed the GameCube to use any of the Game Boy cartridges as well, and adapters were available to allow the console to connect to the internet via broadband or modem. At this point, Microsoft also entered the console market with its first Xbox system, released in 2001. Microsoft considered the PlayStation 2's success a threat to the personal computer in the living room space, and had developed the Xbox to compete. As such, the Xbox was designed based more on Microsoft's experience from personal computers, using an operating system built out from its Microsoft Windows and DirectX features. By the 7th generation, Sony, Microsoft and Nintendo had all developed consoles designed to interface with the internet, adding networking support for either wired and wireless connections. Microsoft entered the 7th generation first with the Xbox 360 in 2005. The Xbox 360 saw several hardware revisions over its lifetime, which became a standard practice for Microsoft going forward. Through its lifetime, the 360 was troubled by a consistent hardware fault known as the Red Ring of Death, which I personally had myself, and Microsoft spent over $1 billion correcting the problem, which they never corrected. Sony's PlayStation 3 was released in 2006. It represented a shift of the internal hardware from Sony's custom Emotion engine to a PowerPC-based system. Initial PlayStation 3 units shipped with a special Emotion engine daughterboard that allowed for backwards compatibility of PlayStation 2 games. However, later revisions of the unit removed this, leaving only software-based emulation for PlayStation games available. Sony banked on the Blu-ray format, which was included from the start, and partially helped spur the adoption of Blu-ray as the forward format for high-definition optical media. With the PlayStation 3, Sony introduced the PlayStation Network for its online services and storefront. Nintendo introduced the Wii in 2006 as well, around the same time as the PS3. Nintendo lacked the same manufacturing capabilities and relationships with major hardware suppliers though, like Microsoft and Sony did. So to compete, they diverged on a feature-for-feature approach and instead developed the Wii around the novel use of motion controls in the Wii Remote, which drove Microsoft and Sony to develop their own motion control accessories to compete. Nintendo provided various online services that the Wii could connect to, including the Virtual Console, where players could purchase emulated games from Nintendo's past consoles, as well as games for the Wii. The Wii used regular-sized DVDs for its game media, but also directly supported GameCube discs. The 7th generation concluded with the discontinuation of the PS3 in 2017. Aside from the usual hardware enhancements, consoles of the 8th generation focus on further integration with other media and increased connectivity. 2013 saw the release of both the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, both with similar improvements over the previous generation's respective consoles, providing more computational power to support up to 60 frames per second at 1080p resolutions for some games. Each unit also saw a similar set of revisions and repackaging to develop high and low-end cost versions. Both consoles eventually released upgraded hardware during their mid-cycle refresh, with Sony releasing the PlayStation 4 Pro and Microsoft releasing the Xbox One X, which allowed for higher frame rates and up to 4K resolutions, in addition to slim models, marking a departure from previous generations, while adding considerable longevity to this generation cycle. Later on in the 8th generation cycle, Nintendo released the Nintendo Switch in 2017. The Switch is considered the first hybrid game console. It uses a special CPU and GPU combination that can run at different clock frequencies depending on how it is used. It can be placed into a special docking unit that is hooked to a television and a permanent power supply, allowing faster clock frequencies to be used to be played at higher resolutions and frame rates, and thus more comparable to a home console. Alternatively, it can be removed and used either with the attached Joy-Con controllers as a handheld unit, or can be even played as a tablet-like system via its touchscreen. Game systems in the 8th generation also faced increasing competition from mobile device platforms such as Apple's iOS and Google's Android operating systems. Smartphone ownership was estimated to reach roughly a quarter of the world's population by the end of 2014. The proliferation of low-cost games for these devices, such as Angry Birds with over 2 billion downloads worldwide, presents a new challenge to classic video game systems. Virtual reality systems also appeared during the 8th generation cycle, with 3 main systems: the PlayStation's VR headset that worked with the PS4, the Oculus Rift, and the HTC Vive, which ran off a personal computer. As of 2025, the 8th generation of consoles are still alive, with the PS4 and the Xbox One still in production. So then guys, here we are man, finally. We now enter the current 9th generation of consoles as of the time of this video. And if you haven't already, maybe you should smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, yeah? Moving on, both Microsoft and Sony released successors to their home consoles in November 2020. Consoles in this generation also launched with lower cost models lacking optical disc drives, targeting those who would prefer to purchase games exclusively through digital downloads, such as myself man. Both console families target 4K and 8K resolution televisions at higher frame rates. Support for real-time ray tracing rendering, 3D spatial audio, variable refresh rates, and the use of high-performance solid-state drives, also known as SSDs. Consoles in the 9th generation now have capabilities comparable to high-end personal computers. Microsoft released the 4th generation of Xbox with the Xbox Series X and Series S on November 10th, 2020. The Series X has a huge base performance target of 60 frames per second at 4K resolution, to be 4 times as powerful as the Xbox One X. One of Microsoft's goals with both units was to assure backward compatibility with all games supported by the Xbox One, including those original Xbox and Xbox 360 titles that are backward compatible with the Xbox One, allowing the Xbox Series X and S to support 4 generations of games, which is absolutely awesome, man. Sony's PlayStation 5 was released on November 12, 2020, and also has a similar performance boost over the PS4. The PS5 uses a custom SSD solution with much higher input and output rates that are almost comparable to RAM chip speeds, significantly improving rendering and data streaming speeds. The chip architecture is also comparable to the PS4, allowing backwards compatibility with most of the PS4 library, while select games will still need chip timing tweaking to make them compatible. And there we are, guys, the history of the home video gaming consoles, man. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. I hope I taught you a thing or two along the way, man. Check the channel out, man. There's plenty of other stuff for you to see on there, besides just videos like this one. And yeah, drop a like, comment, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next one, man. Stay dope, and peace out.